In 1989, Mark Lapine committed an atrocity so horrific it serves as an international PSA. The 14 victims of the Montreal femicide will never be forgotten, calling Canada to take responsibility over unregulated guns and causing women to realize the manner in which their rights have been infringed upon.
Chemical engineering student Anne-Marie Edwards loved sports. She was involved in cribbage, baseball, soccer, chess, kayaking, and even student government. The first thing she did at École Polytechnique was join the school ski team.
Barbara Klucznik-Wadajewicz was a first-year nursing student. She lived in Canada for 2 years after moving from Poland with her high school sweetheart. She was a trained economist, but was working to change career paths just to be with her physician husband.
Michelle Richard, also known as Mimi, was a second-year engineering student. She and her 2 younger siblings were raised by a single mother, but she decided to reconnect with her long-estranged father, for her wedding was only 2 months away and she wished for him to be there.
Maud Havernick was a second-year engineering student. Known for her energetic personality, she was one of 3 sisters and lived with her boyfriend of 7 years. She had already earned a degree in environmental design, but decided to return to university to pursue her true passion of engineering.
Nathalie Crotu was only 3 months shy of earning her degree in mechanical engineering. She was outgoing with a strong passion for science. She was planning a 2-week-long vacation at the end of the holiday season with her best friend, Helene Colgan.
Helene Colgan was a final-year mechanical engineering student planning to pursue a master's degree. Her father loved to brag about her studious tendencies as she read anything she could get her hands on. She was deciding between 3 separate companies offering her a job.
Sonia Pelletier was the youngest of 8 siblings. She was known for winning every competition she entered and securing every scholarship she applied for. She dreamed of opening her very own engineering firm. She was only 1 day away from her final exams. All of these dreams came to an end on December 6, 1989, at the hands of a misogynistic gunman. 25-year-old Mark Lapine entered the École Polytechnique de Montreal with only one goal in mind: to end the lives of as many female students as possible.
At 5:10 p.m., he entered a classroom and ordered the men and women to separate themselves. The students thought he was joking, but he fired a shot into the ceiling. He demanded the men to leave the room, announcing his goal to fight feminism. One of the students told him that they weren't feminists, but rather ordinary students just trying to earn their degrees. Despite their honesty and communication, he opened fire, resulting in deaths of Helene Colgan, Nathalie Couture, Barbara Daniel, Anne-Marie Lemay, Sonia Pelletier, and Anne St. Arnaud.
He moved on to the second-floor corridor, wounding several students along the way. After killing the financial services assistant, Maurice Lagunier, he continued down to the cafeteria on the first floor, murdering Barbara Klucznik-Wadajewicz, Anne-Marie Edward, and Genevieve Bergeron. He moved on to another classroom.
Ordering the men to leave, he shot and wounded Maurice Leclerc. He shot the 2 women presenting, Maud Havernick and Michelle Richard. After killing Annie Turcotte, he ended Maurice's life.
In the words of survivor Genevieve Caldin, "I received a shot in my head, but it's not bad, it's okay," after the guy killed himself.
In the decades leading up to this massacre, Canada's education system was transforming. Although women had been allowed into most Canadian universities by the early 20th century, they still faced barriers. Many English Canadian universities accepted women, but women pursuing education in fields such as engineering or science continued to face considerable social and institutional obstacles. They had to fight for a place in male-dominated fields where they were often met with skepticism or outright hostility.
By the 1980s, while more women had begun to enroll in engineering, they were still met with resistance. Although women had gained the right to be there, it became the responsibility of the other students to make them feel welcome. This massacre is a tragic manifestation of how badly they fell short. Lapine targeted these female students due to their presence in a male-dominated field. From his perspective, it was his duty to fix perceived injustice. This event exposed the tensions in Canadian society surrounding gender roles and the place of women in careers traditionally dominated by men.
Simultaneously, the question of gun control was emerging as a contentious issue in Canada. The RCMP history on firearms in Canada shows that before the late 20th century, regulations were far more lenient than those seen today. Firearms in Canada had long been associated with hunting and sport. Guns were easily accessible and were seen as tools rather than threats. The cultural shift around firearms began as high-profile violent crimes increased across North America. The École Polytechnique Massacre accelerated the movement towards stricter Canadian gun laws, highlighting the responsibility that government held in these deaths. In the wake of the tragedy, Canadians recognized that firearm regulations required reforms in order to prevent violence and protect their rights. This led to the 1991 legislation, which implemented a waiting period for firearm purchases and required background checks. The context of the massacre can be seen through the controversy within Canadian gun legislature at the time. The massacre only added fuel to the fire of firearm regulation.
Mark Lapine claimed the lives of 14 innocent women. This horrific act of violence rooted in misogyny went down in history as Canada's first femicide, or the murdering of women explicitly due to their gender. This tragic event caused a butterfly effect in the feminist movement as well as in gun control for the entire country.
In the years following the shooting, survivors such as Heidi Regin and other advocates campaigned for stricter gun laws. The engineering students at École Polytechnique de Montreal collected over 560,000 signatures in an effort to ban firearms. They emphasized the responsibility of Canadian government to respond appropriately to a tragedy like this one, and stressed their personal rights to enjoy safety and comfort.
Their relentless efforts contributed to the Firearms Act of 1995, introducing mandatory licensing, registration, and background checks for owners of firearms. A registry was created for each province and territory. It stopped the transportation of firearms without proper documentation to prevent the spread of these weapons. This act also required a license to own, sell, or trade firearms. The act effectively prevented the possession of dangerous firearms without permission. While these changes marked a step in the right direction, the fight for stronger restrictions did not end there.
In October 2022, the federal government of Canada literally put a pause on their problems by enforcing a freeze on any movement of gun possession. When Bill C-21 was announced by Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, he declared that the government aimed to prevent Canadians from buying, selling, transferring, or importing handguns. Guns owned prior to the freeze were allowed to remain in the possession of original owners.
In the spring of 2023, an amendment was added to outline the qualifications of a prohibited firearm. While this amendment didn't prohibit guns already on the market, it made it illegal to import or manufacture these weapons. The massacre at École Polytechnique remains a somber reminder of the challenges women faced in male-dominated fields, as well as the critical importance of firearms regulation. It marked a turning point in Canadian society, spurring conversations on gender-based violence and influencing gun control measures that aimed to prevent such tragedies from ever occurring again. It's easy to remember these women for the tragedy associated with their deaths, but it's equally as important to keep them in your hearts as individuals with stories to tell. Their deaths spelled heartbreak for innumerable people, and the impacts that they had were profound, even though they left this earth far too soon. There was a unanimous vote to dedicate a $45 million scientific institute in the name of Anne-Marie Edward. Her ski team wore patches on their sleeves with her initials following her passing. Nathalie Croteau had a community center in Brossard dedicated to her memory. The brother of Annie St. Arnaud posted a collection of poems she had written as a teenager so that her words could grace the world one last time. Maud Havernick's sister, Sylvie, co-founded the December 6th Victims Foundation Against Violence, who gathered to take action against gender-based violence. Maurice Lagenier's husband reported that even 10 years later, not a single night has passed without him praying for her. Heidi Regin, a close friend of Anne-Marie LeMay, became one of the most vocal advocates for gun control after she was killed. The massacre, considering its traumatic history, has held its place as a significant and influential event in feminist and gun legislation history. It is easy to see the repercussions of the shooting. From mourning to rallying to petitioning to changing laws, this event holds a bittersweet place in the hearts of countless people worldwide. While it's easy to see the bigger picture and its massive impact, it's just as important to remember each individual whose life ended that tragic day. Shot and killed while giving her final slideshow presentation, Maurice Leclerc is just one of 14 women that will never be forgotten. The massacre in itself holds a profound historical significance, but so does every single woman murdered whose voice will never be heard.
We will forever remember the 14.